I have with me today Tim Palone. I just want to start out with some questions so that we can get to know you a little. So, where are you from?
So I'm from Oklahoma. I was born and raised here in Oklahoma City. It's a little suburb outside of Oklahoma City, but I've lived here all my life, and so I haven't moved really. So.
Oh yeah, that's nice. I grew up in Massachusetts, and then I moved to Southern New Hampshire when I was in my teens. My mom moved us. So Northern Mass and Southern New Hampshire are pretty interchangeable. We cross over the border back and forth a lot.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so I've lived in this area my whole life. I've actually never been out that way. I went to Las Vegas in November, and that was my first time being anywhere remotely on the West Coast.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, cool.
All right. What college did you go to? So you've been in Oklahoma the whole time. So
I went to the University of Oklahoma, which is in Norman, Oklahoma. It's just about 20 minutes from where I live. And I went there for, the architecture program is a 5-year program. I took 6, classic, waste some time and goof off a little bit. But, and that was I graduated high school in 97. And so I graduated college in 04. So.
Nice. So did you do, was it an accredited program?
It was, yes. Yeah, it was. And it was really as far as how long it took, the way it was structured was obviously you had like studio classes that were the bulk of your education and time. And those were like, half a day, 3 days a week. And you spent a lot of time in design studio, and you had to do it in order. And so you had to take, the fall prior to spring, and if you missed one, that puts you a year behind. And so my first semester, I actually couldn't get into the fall program. And so it put me a year behind right off the bat. That's one of the reasons why it took an extra year for me. But it was pretty arduous, as probably any architecture student or architect can relate to. It's not an easy program.
Right. So did you say that you had studio 3 times a week?
Yes. Yeah. It was 3 days a week, half a day. And, of course, we basically lived there all the time. I mean, we had to work on projects, so we were still able, that was just, designated class time,
Right. Yeah. So I went to Wentworth in Boston, and that's pretty similar to how our studio was structured. We had studio 3 times a week, and it was from 12 to 6 or from 12 to 5. Right. I think as we got older, like when we went into our senior year and our thesis year, it was 12 to 6. It was 12 to 5. And freshman year was like the best year because you only had studio twice a week. So it was Monday, Wednesday, nice. Friday. So you'd get Monday off. You'd have a little extra time. They kind of eased you into it.
Yeah. That's cool. We learned to start kind of loading our schedule to be, in the afternoons, so that on the days you weren't in studio, your other classes were on the other days in the afternoon. So you weren't you can kind of sleep in, or, you could, we kind of manipulated our schedule after a while. We learned how to get smart about it, but
we didn't really even have a choice. It was, these are the classes you're taking, and there's 2 teachers. So basically we would just pick the teacher. Like registration would open, everybody would fight for the same teacher, like the good teacher.
Yeah.
But it wasn't, the only thing that we really got options was we had to take humanities classes, and that was just like random things, like a media class and culture films, but everything architecture related, it was just the architecture kids.
Yeah,
these were the times. This is when the class is. It's only Friday 8 a.m. Like, you have to take this class.
Gotcha.
So it's interesting that you guys even had a choice, because we didn't have. It was like, this is the schedule.
Yeah,
you're in it.
yeah. I kind of, it might have been better if it had been that, with giving that freedom. Of course, as a college kid, we would abuse it. And, it probably didn't help. It would probably been better for me to have a little bit more structure, but all in all, I mean, and in general, the program was good, and I enjoyed my time for sure.
So did you get a bachelor's 5-year or 6-year?
Yeah, it was a bachelor's. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So, and like I said, it took a little longer, but and there was a period of time in the middle of it where, I totally wanted to quit. Like I got tired, I got burned out, and I even backed my schedule off to where I just did studio for one semester. And it was in that time period that I was like, okay, either I got to finish or I got to quit. I can't just do this halfway. And so I decided, okay, we're just going to go for it. And from that point on, I just kind of accelerated and was able to get it wrapped up and move on. So it was, it was tough. It was tough.
So have you known your whole life that you were interested in architecture? How'd you get into it?
So it was about junior high. I always liked to draw. And I ended up gravitating. I always liked to draw house plans and just plans and stuff from like, I would draw cityscapes, like city plans, like in 2D, like, not perspectives. I always just for some reason I was fascinated by plans. And, so that's where it started. And in junior high, I kind of started, just really coming into understanding like what I could do with that,
Yeah.
And we had a careers class, and I was like, there was architecture day and all this stuff. And so I was like, hey, maybe I could be an architect. And I think too, is architects, I think, can benefit from having a technical mind and an artistic mind at the same time.
Yeah.
It helps. And I had some of that balance that I could, it just sort of was a natural fit. And then as time went on, I just kind of knew, What about you?
Yeah.
Was it something that you were just passionate about from the beginning?
So I always thought that I was going to do like psychology or behavioral analysis, which is way different than architecture.
Yeah, but very interesting.
Right. So I went to a technical high school and I took cosmetology, and I really just liked working with the client and giving them like this creative solution to their problem. And I didn't realize that sort of translated into architecture until we were moving and we started looking at hundreds of houses. And after a while, I started to decide that I really liked architecture. And I thought, oh, maybe I'll do interior design or industrial design because Wentworth has that. And I'd convinced myself that if I'd gone to community college first, I could save money. And then I looked into Wentworth and found out that no credits are transferable with the architecture program, because a lot like what you were saying, you have the studio in the fall, you have the studio in the spring, and if you miss one, you have to take them in order.
Right.
So there was no credits. It would have just been more time spent in school. Yeah. So I sort of last minute decision on the final day, I dropped my deposit and was like, well, we'll go try out architecture. And the first week I was texting my mom. I was like, I cannot do this. What did I just sign up for? I'm looking up like how many days or how many weeks can you be at school before you can get a full refund? I'm like, in it, like, how do I get out of here? Like, oh my God.
There was many days like that for me. Okay, how do I quit?
I don't really know what happened. I had a really good first semester studio. Like everyone that was in that studio, there was probably 12 of us. I think maybe 3 or 4 students dropped. A lot of people drop out freshman year, but 3 or 4 students in my studio. There's probably like 12 of us, so 4 people dropped. And there's probably like 6 or 7 of us that actually have stayed friends in like a close-knit friend group throughout the whole 5 years. And some of those people, I went on to live with in college, and I still am very close with. So I feel like having that community support from studio really is what made me stay, because I was so ready to just be like, nope, this was wrong.
Yeah.
And then something changed for me. I think my mom was like, just wait a month, give it a month. And I was like, okay. And it ended up just working out. Like I excelled, and I found myself really enjoying the conversations with the TA and the teacher, and just, I was able to do exactly like you said, the creative and the technical at the same time. Not to say that my school really taught me anything super technical, but it was like thinking about how spaces go together, and how circulation, all of the things they get into. But Yeah, we didn't have any sort of technical classes though.
Right.
They tried to teach us. They had a class called technology, and we all were excited. We're like, oh, they're going to teach us programs. It's going to be so great. And they did not. That was not what the class was about. It was like we had one exercise where we went to like an arboretum in Boston, and they had us with yarn, like trying to calculate the slope. I'm like, how is this going to help me?
Yeah, when are you ever going to do that?
When am I ever going to go onto a site with yarn and calculate a slope? This is ridiculous.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm curious to hear about if you guys had any technical skills, like building construction classes.
So
we didn't get any of that.
We did have some construction type, learning how to, how a building goes together. Not near as much as I think looking back should have been taught. I think that part was definitely, it was just so conceptual and hypothetical and those kind of things. And to be honest, I don't know how to solve that particular part of it. As far as, the programs and software. Yeah, in that time it was Revit was just coming out. So we weren't using Revit. It was AutoCAD. And I think they had 2 classes for AutoCAD, and I took both, or maybe one of them, where I learned most of AutoCAD was from peers, just in the lab, just from friends. Like you're talking about how important the community was, your group of friends, and I mean that was the same for me. That's where I learned so much, was just from those around me, and that's part of the college experience too. It's not just in class, but it was. Looking back, because when I graduated and went to apply for jobs, the first question they ask is, can you draw? Can you use AutoCAD? Can you do renderings? Can you detail a building? And I'm kind of like sort of lying.
Right.
Oh yeah, of course. I could do that, thinking, oh my gosh, I think I can do that, And so the education from, just figuring stuff out on my own, learning how to use the software. So looking back, I think that I would really like to see more emphasis placed on software technology in college. And it's interesting, from my time to the time that you went, it feels like it hasn't changed that much. And yet software has just, Revit is so far beyond the AutoCAD that I was using back then. It just feels like, man, they're missing out. And graduates today really are not prepared in that area, and depending on college, what school they go to, they may have more, the technical detailing and building detailing. But as far as software goes, it's just not there. Like I feel like it should be,
I've heard from people that are going through the Wentworth program now specifically, and other schools as well. My boss has been interviewing around, so we've gotten to sort of hear other people from other schools' experiences, and they're coming out learning Rhino, which is really interesting to me.
That's a little different. I've played with that before a long time ago, but it's
not an architecture tool. Rhino is like it is a 3D modeling tool, but it's not like a documentation tool.
Right.
So it's really interesting to me that some other schools are exclusively using that. I'm not sure if they're teaching it or if they're just exclusively only offering that program to their students for free. But I just think it's interesting that Rhino is coming out of the woodworks and being something that people use, because I don't think I've ever heard of a firm using Rhino in practice.
Yeah, no ones that I know around here. And in my career, I worked at several of the local firms in Oklahoma. It was strictly AutoCAD, 3D Biz, or whatever they, the 3D different Autodesk the programs that Autodesk has. But it's never heard of anyone using Rhino. Now the big one was SketchUp. And for a while, everybody was like, oh man, SketchUp is it. But like you say, it's not that great of a documentation tool. In fact, when it first came out, I don't think you really could. I can't remember, but as far as like 2D drawings, it is not, from my perspective, my opinion is just not that strong of a tool.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think even modeling in it is clunky because everything is an individual line.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
which is like
parts and pieces, and that can get so taxing, over time.
Yep. So you said you made it about halfway through school, and there was like that turning point for you where you ended up going all in and just making it through. Did you have anything that developed that was your favorite part about school that changed it for you?
So yeah, I think after that, I took a studio. We had a couple options on studio. Then one of them was a kind of a practice type not on the job. It was more of, I forgot what they called it, but we essentially, it was just a small group of us, and we designed and built a house. And it was like a Habitat for Humanity or a similar type community program. And for me, that was because it was hands-on, it was tactical, it was real, it wasn't hypothetical. I mean, I was all in on that. And we didn't get to finish the house while, because the studio was only, 4 months or whatever, 3 months, but we got to design and start the process. And for me, that was just so enlightening. I mean, I got so much from that. And then the second, probably behind that, was we had a 3D modeling and animation course, and it was one semester, 1 day a week, and it was probably the only class I went to every class. I didn't skip it one time. It was just I was just enthralled, and that was about the time that movies were coming out, animated features were coming out, and so it was just amazing to see what you can do with a computer and make it look so real, and that's what fascinated me. And so that part of technology and software for me of doing 3D renderings and modeling, that's kind of where I went with it. And it's still, I consider one of my strongest skills today that I use, all the time, of course. And it was just so much fun. I mean, if you can have fun at it, that's the best.
So after you took that class, were you able to keep using those skills for the rest of your time? Like you were able to create cool renderings?
Oh yeah, and I tried. It was, again, in our program, it just wasn't accentuated in that way. It was so I hate to use the cliche old school, but they wanted everything like hand drawn, and they would teach shading with markers, and which never did in real life. Like I never did it in practice. Like it was all on a computer. You couldn't even use a computer up until your third year. Like you had to do everything by hand. And then after that, you had a choice. And so obviously I went to, Photoshop and, graphics and 3D animations and renderings and stuff. And so, but yet, half the class would still, produce stuff on, boards and things. And so there just wasn't, in my opinion, enough emphasis on using the technology. And
I think that that's something that I wish was different about architecture school, that it wasn't so concept and artsy based, right? Like we're talking about all these technical skills that we're lacking and program skills that we're lacking and things that should be at the forefront, because that's what's at the forefront of practice. So, but in school, it's like almost gotten worse, and I would say, since you've been in school, just because I know that a lot of my experiences when I would do, charcoal and like little artsy things to get my concept diagram done, all the teachers would eat it up and be like, oh, this is so great. And I'm like, it's charcoal rubbed on the paper, or, like just always driving, well, what's your concept? And it's like, again, you're creating something with no real extent to it. Like there's like, this is what it is, and these are like some program elements that you need to fit inside of it, and then that's that. And you have to make up some silly concept out of thin air. Like a lot of the concepts were so graspy, like just weird things, weird concepts that have nothing to do with architecture.
And I think that I had the same experience. I mean, and don't get me wrong, like the program is a good program, and obviously wouldn't be here without it. But there's just, I did feel like there were times when it was more art driven than technical driven. And, and coming at it now, I have my own practice, looking to hire help and people to work with me. There's a big demand, I think, for someone coming out of school to be able to use Revit, or to be able to develop their skill set to be able to detail a building with Revit. I mean, I would love to find, it's hard to find those people, and for me, there's a huge opening for that. And just not being able to find someone that can fill that role because they just haven't been taught. They haven't been exposed to it. And then, there's just I think a gap there that needs to be filled.
I think there's also a lot of fear being generated around the program.
Oh yeah.
I remember when I was in school, teachers would really not, I understand why they would say don't use Revit, because it's very easy to just draw a box and make a box. If you don't know how to use the model in place tools, and you don't know how to do massing and then create forms off of the mass, it is really hard to just go outside of the box. So teachers would always say, I really don't encourage you to use Revit. And me, I didn't listen to them. I was like, no, I'm using it. I'll learn how to do my first curtain wall. And I did. It took forever.
Exactly. That's good for years. That's it.
So I think that has generated a lot of like resistance and fear in people that are now graduating, because they probably have never been exposed to it, and they have all that naysaying in their head of like, oh, don't use it because of X, Y, and Z.
Yeah. And it is a huge learning curve. I mean, let's don't pretend that it's easy, that you can just pick it up in a couple of weeks. You can just fly through it. I mean, there is a lot to learn about it. And I was even resistant when it first came out. I was dismissive of it. And, I was like, oh, because I, learned all the shortcut keys in AutoCAD, and I was just blasting away, right? You just learn to just cruise in AutoCAD, and you think you've got it made. And Revit is a completely different workflow, and it's completely different to the way Revit operates. The way you think about how to draw something in Revit is different than AutoCAD. Yep. And I was very resistant to it, but once I finally, and it took several years, but part of it was I had to, for the companies I'd worked for, once I started to learn, little by little, slowly, I was realizing, okay, this is pretty cool. Like I can, draw a wall one time, and I don't have to draw an elevation. I don't have to draw a set. Like it's like, I'm like, okay, and if I move a window over here, it moves in my elevations. And, so you kind of, I would get excited. And that comes back to the excitement that I had when I first learned how to 3D model. It was like, wow, this is fun. And I had that so for me, that it kind of tapped into those excitement of, initially when I first started as a student. And so I started to get excited about it. And then when I saw real world application and real world productivity gains, and, then it was just kind of, I couldn't turn back. And now I can't. Honestly, I love you, AutoCAD. You were my life for so long, but I can't go back. I can't do it. I just,
So I'd love to know the timeline. So did you have to learn Revit in a job, or was this like you decided to learn it on your own?
Kind of both, but there's a big firm in town. They do a lot of cool stuff for Disney. I mean, just nationwide, international. And I was looking to get a job there. And so I downloaded, the trial, and I had enough knowledge to open it and kind of start. So I just started playing around and started to learn some basic things. I ended up getting the job, and I probably presented myself as a little bit more qualified than I actually was, but I got up to speed pretty quick into what we were doing. And I did that for several months. And then that led to another job that I took, where they used Revit. And then it was probably about 2 years of using it pretty much exclusively, that I just really was able to develop a workflow and understanding, all the things that are kind of key. And then after that, I went to work for a high-end home builder, and I went kind of as a contract designer, and he didn't care. He just wanted stuff done. He didn't, he didn't draw, he didn't do any of that stuff. He was like, hey, I need house designs. So I started using it, and that's where I really got into the residential side of it. and using Revit for residential. And because it's actually harder, in my opinion, because with residential, there's more detail and there's more, I guess you like filigree, like there's different, elements that you have to use the mass tools, you have to like model in place and do those sort of things. And so I got to explore that side of the skill sets of learning how to do those things in Revit, aside from just drawing, basic walls and roof and stuff like that. And so it was a course of probably 5 years of using Revit to where, I felt like, and you learn something new every day, right? But it was about 5 years before it was, I was just common. I was, you turn it on and just start going,
There's always a checkbox that you don't know about.
Oh yeah.
Like, all right, why isn't this showing up? Let me check all these things. Exactly. Where's the checkbox?
Or you go to a YouTube video for something and then you learn something like, wow, okay, well that just, that's something I can do now that saves me 10 minutes. Okay. There's always something.
Right. You don't know what you don't know. Like, because we're all self-taught with programs, I'm always like, well, maybe there's a better workflow than what I've been doing my whole life, but I don't know because no one, Autodesk, I know does have Revit courses, but I know that they're really expensive and that you're in like a really large group. I don't think you really get to ask questions. I've never actually personally taken one.
Yeah.
But
well, I think there's definitely room for, because there's not a lot of YouTubers, I guess, that are making Revit videos, Revit tutorials. And honestly, it's not a massive demand, or it's a very neat, it's a small niche, but I think that it needs to happen. The few that I've used, I go to a lot to, learn things and solve issues. And so.
Yeah. So how long have you had your independent practice?
So I was licensed 4 years ago, actually June of 2018. And I literally finished my last test, and like a week later got a pass on it, turned everything into the state, and 3 days later they're like, yep, here's your, come by and pick up your stamp and your seal, and you're good to go. And I filed everything that day, and I was literally working on a project like that day. Like I was working on a house that day as my own practice. And so for about 4 years I've been operating my own practice, and it's been nothing but up since day one, busy, new projects. And I have a network of builders I work for that always have projects for me to do. And I'm in the position now where I have a couple contract employees that help me with Revit to keep up. But I'll tell you, like, the way that I operate and the volume of work that I'm able to get done would not be possible without Revit. It is literally it's the foundation for how I can operate my practice. Otherwise, if I was still in AutoCAD, I'd have to hire 2 or 3 people, and it would there's no way that I can do what I do without it. That's not an exaggeration.
Yeah, so it's just you most of the time. Then if you need some help, you have your contract workers. Okay. Yeah. So you talked about at the beginning how it's really hard to find somebody that has Revit experience. So are you at the point now where you're looking to hire someone full time, but you just can't find somebody in your area that knows Revit?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I could definitely. I'm looking for that person, and it's going to sound like an ad, but I'm looking for that person that is looking to, not just be a Revit tech. They, obviously to get licensed and take on the, graduate, take on, graduated responsibilities and project management and, principal architect and that kind of thing. Because frankly, I don't want to grind away drawing for the next 25 years. You know what I mean? Right. Like I love it, but there's a point where I do want to get away from that part of it and focus on, the business the business side. Right now I have to do it all. I have to do all the things, and it's hard. I consider, my practice to still be in that fledgling kind of, it's grown a lot of projects and things, but it's still in that kind of, formative phase. And, I'm at the cusp of that next chapter. And so, but like I said, like the person that I bring in, that literally you have to have Revit experience and you have to know how to use it. Like I don't have a lot of time to train. Like
exactly.
I can't, like you have to know how to like come in and be able to detail a building pretty quick, you know.
That is exactly what we're going through right now.
Yeah.
Like, so it's just my boss and I, so I'm very one-on-one with him. I have stepped into, you know, assistant role, basically everything that you're just saying that you're looking for. And it is just, you know, we were just trying to hire somebody, but they had no AutoCAD or Revit experience. They were using DataCAD. I'm like, I've never even heard of DataCAD.
I've heard of that. Yeah.
And so I'm like, do we really want to hire somebody that I will have to then train? That's going to take my productivity time away.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just training them to do drawings the way that we do drawings. It's training them how to use programs. And it's like,
exactly.
You know,
so if you're listening out there, learn Revit.
Learn Revit,
learn
please.
Revit. Like you've got to. Like it's where everything is going to go. It's taken a long time. I think that Autodesk wanted it to go there faster, but it will get to the point because, you know, like government projects, like that's a requirement, and that's a part of getting a government project is Revit. You have to have a seat, and you have to the latest seat. You have to, and there's everything is, you know, is getting to the point where it's going to be that way, and then it's just, you know, there's a lot of, I think there's the way that society and especially since COVID, everybody's working differently now, remotely, and you know, like one of the people that I talked to about working for me was in Alabama, you know, and it's like, yeah, I don't care where you're at. Can you use Revit?
Can you use Revit?
You know, can you use Revit, you know? And so there's just, I think that if a student takes the time, or whoever, someone that's in a practice that's working to get proficient at it, I mean, the opportunities for that person are just off the charts.
Right. You become so valuable.
Yeah.
Yeah. It really makes you invaluable just because so many big firms are using it, because it's so much easier when you're doing big. So I don't work on big multifamily projects currently, or like school housing projects, but I'm just thinking like, I have worked at firms that did that and only used Revit because it's so hard to, I can't even imagine how people worked in AutoCAD. Not only the fact that AutoCAD is only, you can't file share, whereas with Revit, you can all work in the same central model.
Yep.
So to me, it's just like, it's totally mind-blowing to me that people were even able to function as a team using just AutoCAD with all the separate files.
Yeah, I think, you know, the last time I did a large project in a firm with AutoCAD, there was XREFs, you know, XREF. There was probably 30 or 40, you know, everybody's working on their own, and it gets XREF, just like, okay, somebody save, and, you know, you got to reload.
It's like, hey, Jeff, did you move that window?
Yeah,
you know, 4 feet?
Exactly. You know, it's just like, man, you know, it's just, and I get the frustration of learning a new program. I understand all that, but, you know, with risk, there's reward. Good things are usually hard to achieve. Like it's not good if it's easy to get usually. Like, you know, so
it's going to be a time investment in the beginning, but once you get over that hurdle, it exponentially increases your productivity and workflow times.
And like what you said there, exactly. Exponential increases. It's not a, you know, a straight line. It's so like once you get the basis and the foundation, your growth just is exponential. Like it just compounds so fast to the point you can be proficient pretty fast. Like, you know, within a few months, you could really be proficient. You can, you know.
And, you know, we've talked a lot about, obviously it is a documentation tool as well as a modeling tool. So it's really helpful in architecture practice. But what we haven't really talked about is how valuable the fact that you're modeling and drawing at the same time simultaneously, and you have then a 3D model that you can render.
So I use that all the time. You know, like with old days, that was another function, right? You had to do the model, everything was separate. So so I present that model right away. Like I present it
Mm-hmm.
right away. It's not something that I, you know, I don't do polished renderings for free, like
Yeah.
a real photorealistic free, but it's something that I can show quickly to a client,
Right.
and they, you can even learn how to set up the views that are just built into Revit to
Yep.
be artistic. I mean, you
Yep.
can make it really nice, a really nice presentation in a few clicks.
Yep.
And like I have a way that I present it all the time, and it's
Right.
built in now. And
If you
so
set
it's
up a
just,
view template in
it's
your
there.
file, then you just click your view template and bam,
Yeah.
all of your renderings look the same.
Yeah. And
Mm-hmm.
you could, like I said, you can make it look, you could personalize that look. You could be artistic there.
Mm-hmm.
And then you could, flip over to the 3D, and start making changes on the model right there
Exactly.
in front of, your client. And so,
I
and
think
then
that is so valuable, especially from a
oh
client
yeah,
point of view, because, if you're not an architect or a builder, you don't know how to visualize
can't see
anything
it.
in 3D.
Yeah.
You're like looking
Yeah.
at, especially our residential clients. So at first it was kind of like, okay, Melissa, like do the commercial projects because in Revit, because we can render them. They'll be really nice for the planning
Yeah.
board, and we're going to get the planning board approvals.
Oh
So
yeah.
just commercial. And now that it's just me, my boss is like, okay, I guess do everything in Revit. And because we used to just do residential in AutoCAD, he felt like it was
Yeah.
quicker. But then we would have over and over again our residential clients, especially because they're just, your average person that wants to update their home or build a new home. And they're not necessarily a commercial developer that we're working with on a commercial project. They're a residential person, and they cannot visualize at all what it's going to look like. So a lot of the time we were spending in AutoCAD, and then just happened too is like, well, can you actually model us the shell of the house? It's a new exterior, so we can understand it. And I'm yep, I could definitely do that. I'm like, look at my boss, like this one should have been in Revit, but it's in AutoCAD. Now I gotta do it twice.
I mean, that's something I show all of my like no matter what, they're going to get a 3D view. Like there's it's just it's critical to and to see them light up. It's like, oh wow, okay. And you can say, well, this is actually how it's going to look. It's not something that was taken to another program. It was kind of fudged to make it look a certain way.
Like if you go from AutoCAD to SketchUp, which is like a common workflow.
This is literally how it will look in real life. Like this is it. Like it's accurate. And then because you can flip right to the floor plan and say, this is, to whatever 1/256 of an inch, if you want to say that. Like it's it is accurate, and this is how it's going to be. And then you could even do as far as color combinations, you could roll through and do different concepts on paint or brick color or stucco, EFIS, all those things. And so that part of it too. I mean, again, that goes back to learning. When I first learned how to 3D model, it's like, wow, it's already here, And my workflow, I work inside that 3D world a lot, I'll go back. Obviously you can't model everything and draw everything in that 3D view, but I'm always in it. I design, I'm always in that view. And so, and then I have a tool that I use to do the polished, what I call photorealistic type renderings is a B-Ray plugin. And I bought it because it works inside Revit, the exact same view, perspective, and you assign your materials and do all the texture mapping and things like that. The lighting is fantastic, and it produces hyper realistic, super nice, like add on your adjectives there, all the different so it looks really good. And again, you can be as artistic as you want with that too. And it was just so quick and easy. So I can go from a basically nothing schematic drawing to a polished model in less than a day, sometimes less than an hour, depending on what I'm doing, if it's a simple project. So again, going back to how critical Revit is to my practice, and going back to learn Revit. Do it. For those that you may, that want to be an architect and have their own practice, like it's to me, it's critical. It's you have to.
Yeah. Because there's so many other things that you have to be doing that you don't have the time to draw something in AutoCAD and then model it.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. I can go, and I have, template. I have a workflow that's kind of preset. If I start with a new home client, no matter usually how big the house is, doesn't matter. I could theoretically go from nothing to a permit set in less than a day. There's no way you're going to do that in AutoCAD. There's no way. You're looking at a week, and it's just that good,
Yep. And I love how you said that you work in 3D all the time, because that's exactly how I am too. Like, it's kind of a double-edged sword, because when I am working in AutoCAD, it's really hard for me to visualize things because I'm so used to Revit just producing that image for me. But I just design so much better in 3D because it's instantaneous. Like, I can see how all the roofs are going to meet. I can see right away where all the problems are going to be, mostly with anything.
That's a critical thing you just mentioned there, is roofs, because in AutoCAD, that's, especially in residential, roofs are always a problem. And you may, no matter how much you think about them and try to draw them, especially if you're doing hips and gables and really complex roof systems, that it's not easy to get it right. And you don't know that until they're building it, and they're like, hey, you got a problem here. This roof isn't going to work, and with Revit, you immediately see it. And if you're doing something that's completely bizarre and won't work, usually Revit will fail. Like, it'll say, no, it's not going to work. And so you immediately know, okay, well, I'm doing something wrong here. And it's not perfect. Like, roofs might be 2 or 3 different pieces that I've got to join. And, I got different things you have to match up, different plate heights and things you got to mess with. But it still is by far one of the very important pieces of Revit, is because you can see that in 3D immediately and be able to quickly come to a solution.
And being able to type in not only just roof slopes, but being able to type in elements, right? How tall your wall is, the parametric windows and, families, just being able to instantly change those components and see the changes instead of having to go back and update it every single spot. It's like, we've had times where we're working, it's like a working session with the client. We bring them in, we have the Revit model. We're like, well, what if we did a 12/12? And we're like, okay, type in 12/12. Yeah. And this is what it's going to look like. And like, oh yeah. Like,
it's that easy.
Great.
Yeah.
So it's just like, and the clients love it. They can see it. And it's just so
well, and you
valuable.
just went through, like, if you were just using traditional drafting tools, you just went through like a day's worth of changes in a second. Like, you literally don't have to go back, redraw the roofs in 2D and all, make sure all your elevations look right. Like, you type in the number and, the pitch goes up, the pitch goes down, or you have different pitches on different sides, and you do it so much, we don't even think about it anymore. Like, it's just part of the daily work task,
Right.
It's like,
I'm like moving things, my boundaries for my floors or my roofs in 3D, because I just can see when it highlights the surface it's going to be next to. Like, everyone's looking at me like if somebody's watching me over the shoulder, like, can you be in floor plan? I'm like, no,
that's the way. Because I'm too lazy to click
over
the button, to click the tab to go to the floor plan to change the roof line. It's like, I'll just stay right here, I'll get it real quick. It's no big deal.
It's gonna highlight the wall for me when I'm close to it.
It's like, we'll get there. It's I know exactly what you mean. It's just like anything, once you're in it long enough, you really start to get those shortcuts down. Like, I change shortcut keys, and I mean, and for those that are just going from AutoCAD to Revit, you can change your shortcut keys to match. Like, they have a lot of the same commands, like extends and trims, and there's a lot more commands, obviously. Like, now you type, WL or whatever you want for wall, WA or whatever you want, and it's drawing the entire wall. It's not just drawing a line, right? But you can totally customize it to where you can really get the workflow similar to what and that was helpful for me to go from AutoCAD to Revit, was to try to match some of those things that my mind kept wanting to do, and
because it's so ingrained.
You're ingrained, you're hitting spacebar all the time, and you're trying to hit the same, shortcut keys for AutoCAD, and, so like, customize it, set it up. It's easy, set it up to match, make it similar. there's so many ways to do it. There's so many ways to do the same thing. And
Right.
it is similar to our AutoCAD that way. There's so many ways to do the same thing. Find what works best for you,
And if there's ever, so a workaround that I used to do all the time when I was in school and I didn't have time to necessarily make something look 100% the way I wanted in floor plan, I'd just export it to CAD, right? I would just export the floor plan, explode everything, clean up any lines I needed to clean up. And then that was that. That was it. So even people who are like overthinking it and can't get it to look exactly right because they don't know how to, if you get it close enough and you just export it, you can just manipulate it in CAD.
Yeah. Figure out the way, right? The struggle for me was doing like interior elevations, or enlarged sections, wall sections. Like, okay, Revit, there are ways, it's not going to give you that, every stud, every section piece. It does provide the tool set, the details. You can go in, you can draw out, you can get that section of the stud channels and all the different things you need to build a wall section. But if you that's where you can kind of go back to the AutoCAD mentality. You can open up a drafting view and you get in there, or you can go right into the section and just, turn it on medium or fine or whatever works best. And then you just start laying in those pieces right inside that and in that way it is a lot like AutoCAD, or you can just straight go to like a drafting view and start drawing with lines.
Exactly.
And what's nice about it is you don't have to worry about layering. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff. You just,
because it's all there.
Yeah, it's medium, heavy, like it's all right there. Like you just go in and start picking your lines and it's going to look great. And you don't have to worry about all the extra layering and commands and stuff that AutoCAD has.
A lot of times when I'm doing sections, I'll just use the model as a reference and I'll draw like filled regions over everything and lines over everything. And then I'll hide the walls and I'll hide the roof. And I'm like, okay, because
I hide so much stuff in sections.
I'm like off.
Because it does when it cuts a section, especially with roofs, like it does weird, like sometimes it's too exact. You're like, oh man, it just looks bizarre. And I'll trace things and then turn it off behind and clean it up. And so, but that functionality is there. It's all there. So,
So one thing that I'm like at the point at now is I need to change the template line weights in Revit. Like I'm just using the standard ones and they're awful, but I just haven't had time to go in and figure out, they have it in like decimal inches. And I'm like, I don't know. So I would be curious to hear like what your experience was with that.
The line weights were like 1 through 15 or 12. I can't remember.
It's like 1 through 16.
So it was some trial and error in printing and trying to figure out what those actually stood for. I kind of muddled, like I used what was there and I built on top of it. And because I wanted my own property line, I wanted some of my own things that made more sense to me and how I worked with it. And so it was trial and error, which was pretty much what most things are when you're trying to learn stuff in Revit. Was for me, the struggle was, okay, where do I go? Once I figured out where to go, okay, what do the things mean? How do I make a new line? So it was a struggle to just get through it. And now it's all set up and I don't have to worry about it anymore.
Right.
So
I
went through the heartache and now it's paid off. But
one thing I forgot to ask you was I was curious about like what types of architecture you're working on. So you talked a lot about residential, obviously. What else are you doing commercial wise?
Commercial, residential, about 50-50. Doing everything from like working on a museum right now that hopefully we're in the very early preliminary fundraising stages right now, to tenant improvements, just going into a space and moving a business into that. We do work for, do a lot of like, for one is Black Rifle Coffee. We're doing their coffee shops. They're doing brick and mortar stores now. So I got that contract here in the OKC area. They have like a 4 or 5 state agreement. So we're doing 10 of those. Some of those are ground up. Some of those will be tenant improvement. Really all genres, all types. I don't say no to anything right now. I can't be picky. So we do pediatric offices, dental offices. We're doing just regular old business offices. The only thing I haven't done my practice hasn't done is probably education, schools. I did a lot of that working for other firms, but I haven't got into that world yet in private practice. But so really all things that come along. So
yeah, nice. That's a lot how we work. We don't turn down projects, and it keeps it really fun and exciting, because a lot of the firms I did my co-ops at, which was just like 3 months at a time, were all different, but they all had niches: historical preservation, multifamily and student housing, and then just interior fit ups. And it was just that category for that firm. And I just really was struggling with, how am I going to work somewhere for more than 2 years before I'm done with it?
You know, I don't think I did.
There's only so many, right? There's only so many fit ups you can do. There's only so many.
Oh yeah.
Of one type of architecture. So when I found this practice, I was like, thank you. Like, this is what is going to keep me interested. It's always something new. And there's just so much to learn. You truly never stop learning as an architecture professional. You just never stop.
You don't.
There's always a new product.
Don't try to stop. Like, literally always keep learning. It's just something that you'll never reach a pinnacle. There's always more. And so it is exciting, and there's a level of stress just from the business aspect of it. You know, it's our family's income. So there's a lot of weight that, you have to carry, but it's all worthwhile. And for me, knowing that that's what I always wanted to do when I started getting into the architectural world, was work for myself, that it's very fulfilling. And anybody out there that, is on the beginning stages of that, keep going. Don't lose sight of the goal. Gain skills, learn Revit, and just build on that skill set. Learn how to put buildings together in Revit, and just keep going, and just don't give up, and you can get there. So
it's definitely a rewarding journey. And
it is.
That's the part that's really key, is just enjoying the journey, because there's so many different stages. There's the school journey, and then there's the path to licensure journey. So
which was long for me.
Yes.
It was a good 10, 12 years, so.
It's long for a lot of people, there's the hours of experience you need to get. And then there's 6 tests now that you have to take. I haven't started taking any of the tests yet, but I have completed my hours. So
it's good.
That's my next journey.
That's right. Absolutely. And that's a whole nother part. And there will be times that you want to quit. Just don't. Just, if you think you're going to quit, give it another day. I heard that the other day. I was like, that's pretty brilliant. Just give it another day. Anytime you feel like you're at the max that you can handle, just give it another day, and something will open up, something will make itself known, and you can get there. So yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, this has been great.
Yeah. So, thank you so much for your time. I loved having this conversation. It's so nice to hear from other people out there. They're not only their school experiences, but what it's like to run a practice. It's so valuable to hear, and I just want to thank you again for your time.
Absolutely.
So nice.
Thanks for setting us up, and we should do it again.